Hey, what's up guys? Threat Level Midnight here, and today I got a review for you. It's going to be the dovedot from Dove Mounts, or Dove Adaptive Mounting Solutions. Kind of a cool product here that replaces the rear sight of your handgun. This one's for a Glock. And basically you're going to drift it into place. It's going to replace your sights. It comes with a front sight, and let's go ahead and get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is just use the sight tool and remove the front sight from the Glock. I've done it without the tool before. It's really a pain to do, especially if you're trying to tighten the thing down. So just save yourself some headache and get a little tool, a little wrench. Is just a few bucks just to pull the front sight off. After I pull that screw out, I like to put it back in the front sight. And I don't know about you guys, but I have a huge parts bin full of all the little pieces, sights, springs, screws from all the guns that I've upgraded over the years. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to finish taking off the factory sight. So I'm going to use a square punch that I got from a set of Dawson precision sights. Kind of convenient if you don't have a sight pusher. And I'm just going to go ahead and drift that rear sight out. So this particular punch is made out of aluminum, so it's a lot softer than your the steel that's on your slide. And usually what happens is if you're drifting steel sights with it, the punch will actually start deforming itself before it mars your gun. So that's kind of important when you're drifting sights without a sight pusher, is to use the right type of punches for the job. The plastic sight's really easy to drift out. It doesn't take much effort at all. I'm using a really low weight hammer and just my little dovetail punch. So now we'll see what that dovedot mount comes with. So when you're looking at the box, you're going to see your main plate that's in there, and it's going to drift right into that dovetail notch. It has the post, and it's cut for the RMSC optic mount, and you can see it has just a built-in non-adjustable iron sight. It comes with a raised front sight and 2 fiber optic options. So just like every other screw on a gun, you should be putting thread locker on it. I've seen tons of these Glock front sights vibrate out of place, people losing their tritium sights because they didn't put enough thread locker on here, or they didn't use a Glock tool to tighten that screw down. But basically all we're going to do is drop this front sight into position and then run that screw down. You can see there's a side of the front sight that's smooth, which is going to go towards the muzzle end, and then there's one that has little scallops on it, and that one's going to be towards the back of the handgun. So all I'm doing right now is just screwing it in hand tight. I'm making sure that the sight is straight, because if the tolerances are loose, you can kind of put it off center, and then once I see it centered, I'll go ahead and crank it down. So the next step here is to select our fiber optic. We're going to go with red, and then per the Dove mounting instructions, it says to heat one end with a lighter, and I'll show you that here in just a second. And all it's going to do is soften that little post and just tap it against the lighter, and it makes kind of a bulbous end on it. And then you can go ahead and slide it through the front of the sight, and it will be captured at least on one end. But then after you get it set up and get it through the front sight, you can trim it, and then you're going to repeat that process, but just for the other side of it. So the Dove instructions say you can use scissors for this part. I found that I can get a cleaner cut if I use a razor, so I'm just going to be using just kind of a standard razor knife for this. And then on top of that, I'm using a little bit of the cardboard from the packaging, and I'll protect the slide while I'm coming down with the razor on it. So this part's doable when you're by yourself. It might be helpful to have either an extra set of hands or just a little piece of tape to hold that cardboard down, because it's just kind of a lot for just one set of hands to be taken care of. But in the end, it wasn't that tricky, so I was able to just cut it off, and it made a nice clean cut on the front of the sight. So now that we have our fiber optic cut to size, we're going to go ahead and heat it just like we did the first time around, and it'll get a soft, and then I'll tap the lighter on it and get it to expand inside the port that it's sitting in. And I think after we tapped it with the lighter, that side looked pretty darn good, and I'm going to go ahead and repeat it on the front side to clean it up a little bit. But pardon me, because there's a fan blowing it out here. Okay, so now I turn the fan off, and that'll make our life a lot easier. So I'm just going to repeat these steps here and just heat and press on both the front and the back of the sight. And then once I'm done reheating the front of the sight, I'm going to trim it after I get it to expand inside the front sight itself. Now this step's fairly important. You want your fiber optic to look crisp and clean, and on the other side of it, you want it to be secure in there. So off camera, I even put a little drop of super glue on either end of the sight, just because I don't want it to vibrate out. You can see I repeat the heating process a number of times. Like I say, I'm not gonna skimp on this part. I want this to be as crisp and secure as possible, and so I'm going to do a lot of checks on it from both sides to make sure the front and the back of the fiber optic are crisp, because it's the last thing you want, is to have a nice narrow fiber optic sight, but you mashed it and now it's twice the width that it normally should be. So looking down the slide, it looks pretty good from the back side, and I'll just do one more check on the front and make sure it's solid. So now I'm going to put the soft jaws back on the vise and throw the slide back in there, because it's time to install the dovedot itself now that the front sight's been installed. So when you cut the thing out of the packaging, it's going to ship with a really teeny set screw that goes into that dovetail portion, and I'll show you that right here. And basically, you need to take that thing out before you start drifting it into the dovetail. It's super small, so make sure you have a secure location to put it. And I've never used one of these dovedots before, so hopefully that's enough to keep this thing locked into place under recoil, but we'll see. So I'm going to start by setting the plate on there, and just to get it started, I'm going to use a regular steel punch just to get it into the dovetail, and then I'll switch over to a brass punch when I need to put a little more torque onto it. So now that I have the plate started, I'm going to go ahead and loosen up my vise and change directions, and use my brass punch, and I can start giving it, put a little bit more force on it with the hammer just to get it drifted into position. And something that I was happy with is the fit of this plate into the dovetail. I've heard of people having ones that fit their dovetail loose, but this one was significantly tighter than the factory Glock sights. And again, those are plastic, so it's not much of a comparison, but this one actually took quite a bit of force to get it into the dovetail. So what we're looking for is just to mechanically zero these sights. So I'm just going to try to knock this thing as very close to center as I possibly can. So I'm going to take it out of the vise, check it from the back, check it from the left, check it from the right. And if I see that it's off on either side, I'll just put it back in. And in this case, it needs to get drifted back just a little bit further than that I had initially hit it in there. But this is part of the process, and it's really not that time consuming. I'm showing you guys this video in real time. I only cut a few things out if I like dropped a tool or something, but it really doesn't take long to install this thing. So now that we're satisfied with its position, we're not going to put the set screw in yet. We're going to do a test fit of our optic. This plate comes with 2 different size screws, so you need to test your optic and see which size screws you need. We're going to be using the Holosun 407K. For this particular one, I didn't test the Holosun screws that came with the Holosun. I figured I might as well just use the dovedot screws. I didn't know if the threads were compatible, and like I said, I didn't even bother to check. And for all you Holosun haters out there, I'm at peace with it. Obviously, we're doing a budget build here where we're not sending this slide out to get milled, and we're using a Holosun. But like I say, I think that Holosuns have come up in the world quite a bit. And so we're going to do this just initial mock-up here, see how it looks, make sure it's sitting flush on there and there's no kind of deformities, and then we'll go through our screw selection. So like I said, it comes with 2 sets of screws. It comes with a short set and a long set. So I first tried the short set here, and you can see that maybe I get like 2 threads out of the bottom of the Holosun 407 there. So obviously that's not going to cut it. So I'll have to go with the long screws. But the long screws are quite a bit longer, so I was a little bit worried that if I ran the long ones all the way down, they'd be impacting the slide and not torquing the optic down. So just like the Dove instructions, you should torque them down and make sure that everything sets the way it's supposed to before you do your final fitting. So all I'm going to do is just wrench these things down and see if I can get a final fit. So far, I've liked this product just on the install. I think it feels fairly good quality. My only problem is these screws are like a 1/16 Allen head, and I really think they should be using Torx. You know, it's you know, the Holosun instructions for torquing an optic down are like 13 inch-pounds, but I don't have any way to chalk up a 1/16 Allen into my torque screwdriver, so that makes my life kind of difficult. If they just used a standard like a T15 Torx, not only would it not strip out or be less likely to strip out, but it'd be easy to put that into a torque screwdriver. But instead they went with the 1/16. So now that I have it fit up with the long screws, I can see that, hey, they ran down all the way, the optic's secure, and those are going to be the ones that we end up going with, and we won't need to test anything out. So real quick, I'm just going to back these screws out, and we'll go ahead, and the next step's going to be to put in that teeny little silver set screw that we had to take out from the beginning. So one other thing I noticed with the Dove screws is they're just flat on the base. They're not tapered on the bottom, so they stick up a little bit more in these optics because they're built for tapered screws. So that was something I noticed, that they just didn't sit flush with the optic like a factory screw would. Kind of makes me want to go get the Holosun screws out of the box and see if they're the same thread pitch as the Dove mount. But now, find that little set screw that we took out. The thing's really small. Make sure put a generous amount of the blue thread locker on it, because this is going to be kind of the whole thing that holds this in place under recoil. It didn't provide torque specs from Dove, but they just said just put it snug so that you don't strip it out. And again, you know, when you're dealing with a 1/16 Allen, yeah, I think that's a pretty good practice to just, you know, go hand tight with it and be careful, because you could strip it out, and there's not really a good way to get that out unless you're going to drill it out. So I'm just going to wipe off the extra Loctite that I got on there, and now it's time to finish the mounting of the optic. So I'll throw that 407 back on there and get those long screws in there. And I actually mounted one of these on a Smith & Wesson Shield 9mm with the Holosun EPS, and that one needed the short screws instead of the long ones. So there is a difference between the plates and the optics, so just make sure you do this portion correctly and don't just try to throw short or long screws in there, because it might mess it up. So I start the screws one at a time. I'm just going hand tight just so that they're balanced. And then once I get the second screw in there hand tight, I'll go ahead and put a little torque on it. And like I said, unfortunately, because it's this weird little Allen size, I don't have a bit for my torque screwdriver for this, so I'm just kind of estimating 13 inch-pounds by hand here, which is obviously not ideal when you're mounting optics, especially when it's going to be a component that's under heavy recoil all the time. So once we put these final touches on, the installation will be complete. And, you know, I know it mounts it really high, a lot higher than the MOS or having your slide cut, but the whole name of the game here is this is a budget way to get an optic onto your Glock. I think it's kind of a cool way to do it, especially because for the price of like $85, it comes with a front sight and you have a iron sight rear, so it's kind of the complete package without having to shell out a lot of money. But kind of budget's the name of the game here, so it'll be interesting to see how this works out. But when I put the gun together here, you can kind of see the finished product. The next video I put out will be a range review of this. I'd like to put at least 500 rounds on it in one day, just to see how it holds up, if anything vibrates loose. I'll put some witness marks on there to see, but thanks for watching.